name is Steve. I do vocals in the band. So the band is from the Metro Detroit area of Michigan. That's where we started, and that's where we're still based out of. Everyone is there now except me. I live in San Diego, and we've been doing it this way for the last year. In this last year, I think I went back 4 times, I think. So yeah, just fly back, practice up, hit the road, and it seems to work so far. So the new record, Dead Planet, is our second proper full length, and I think it marks a bit of a departure from what we originally established as our sound. I mean, we were pretty based in hardcore when we started, but we'd always incorporated post-metal elements to the sound, and I think the more we've gone on, the more we have kind of evolved from that sound. Earlier in the year, before we put out Dead Planet, we put out a 3-song EP called Parting Remains, and it's kind of a companion, in a sense, to Dead Planet. It's just 3 songs, and I think it kind of, that EP alone symbolizes the end of our more hardcore, like, punk beat-based sound, and a move into a more slower metal, post-metal, whatever you want to call it, sort of sound. So every band hits that point in their career where, they either redefine themselves or they just keep putting out the same album over and over again, kind of like Hatebreed. Absolutely. I mean, we've even talked about becoming a 4-piece. We can't keep a bass player these days, and we had a lot of lineup changes in the beginning, but for the last 3 years, it's been the same 4 dudes with a different bass player rotating in and out. So as the sound is changing and as we're going this way, and I mean, thus far, we've received great feedback from Dead Planet. I mean, we love it. We feel good about it. People are receiving it well. So yeah, I think this is a point in the band's trajectory where we're just going to keep following this path. I mean, this is what we feel good doing, and this is what is in, the where it's coming from. This is where it's just a natural progression or evolution, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I mean, this is a sign of what's to come. I think it's been a steady push in that direction if you really look over all 4 of our releases. So with this record and with Parting Remains, the companion EP, we decided to do something a little different. We decided to do a concept, like an overarching concept. It's basically, the themes of it employ a lot of what we've already written about, which is essentially our relationship, human beings' relationship with the earth. And a lot of it stems from Daniel Quinn's novel or novels, however you want to look at it, the Ishmael series. We wrote a little more directly with those records. I didn't feel like I was done, like I had said enough about those issues, so we decided to kind of like wrap it up into a sci-fi concept. It basically involves like a post-apocalyptic scenario where some humans, like your more privileged classes, get to leave the Earth in like some sort of generation starship, and they set out to basically, a lot of science fiction that incorporates this sort of plot setting would normally there's usually a destination, like some sort of other planet that they're trying to inhabit, and we came up with this idea that humans decided that rather than relying on a planet to sustain their way of life, that they would manufacture this perfect entity that could sustain human life, completely man-made, completely manufactured, and therefore they don't have to rely on another planet, which kind of, in a really exaggerated sort of way, expresses just how bloated the human ego is, and like how we just basically see ourselves at the top, rulers of the entire earth, instead of being a species that exists on the earth, within the earth, and amongst the other species of the planet, right? It's like this like total domination idea that we have. And so we exaggerated that and said, like, let's put these people in space and let's make them think that they can exist without any sort of natural biosphere. Yeah, so like the themes of, so the first EP basically tell in 3 songs, between like a written narrative excerpt that we put in the liner notes, and then between the songs themselves, basically sets the stage for the final evacuation from Earth, and kind of ends with like, obviously not everyone got to go. So there's like legions, masses of people left on this like ruined planet to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to survive. And then you've got this elite class of privileged people that are now like, they've been evacuated ship by ship into space, into this giant starship. And so Dead Planet picks up, I guess Parting Remains would be written from a third person perspective, like some sort of narrator. And then Dead Planet picks up from a first person narrative. And so that the whole record is told through the eyes of a main character of this story that we concocted. Now, originally, we were going to include an actual copy, like some sort of like photocopied, like zine style copy of the story. But we essentially decided that that might be too much. Maybe one day we will release the story. There's a working draft of it floating around right now. And so if you were to have that story in front of you, I think the lyrics would make a lot more sense. But right now, as it stands, like the lyrics are written from this first person point of view of this character who you aren't really quite sure who this person is, where this person is from, but there's a story going on. There's a journey. Like if you read the lyrics from start to finish, like you can kind of see this evolution take place. And I think it's a concept that we're going to keep rolling with. It's going to bleed into the next release in one way, shape, or form. It's just a fun way to explore themes. I would hope that it would help tune people in a little bit more, rather than like putting this like really heavy, dense, like here's this monumental problem that we face as humans existing on Earth. Like we don't have any answers, but like digest this information and figure out how you can incorporate it into your own daily life. Like that's a lot to take in. So I guess the hope was that by doing it narrative style, that it might intrigue people a little bit more. And like the way we did it, like without including the story and without giving them everything, is we've given anyone who's interested, we've given them, a couple pieces to this puzzle that we're laying out. And, there's a lot that you can extrapolate from it, personally. You can identify with the character, I think, just on a personal level in day-to-day life. And then you can also identify with his struggles within the world that he lives. And it's a very similar parallel to what we experience as humans in 2016, here on Earth. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's a crazy space narrative. Frank wants to say hi. After reading Ishmael, probably 3 years before we started the band, I knew that I wanted to take a lot of those ideas and set them to music. The way Daniel Quinn kind of summed up the world and human history for me, I don't know what it was about the way he wrote that book, but it made me see it in a way that I never had. And I felt an urgency to put those ideas to music. And I just couldn't find the right band for 3 years. Like I played in so many different bands, and I was ready to use this concept. So by the time Hollow Earth finally started, late 2011, like I knew, like when we started writing the songs, I was like, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to do this concept. So I had this idea and I ran with it. And there was a few points where I would get hung up, like trying to actually set the words to the music, and Mike would kind of come in and he would help me make sense of it. And then when we did Silent Graves, he actually stepped in quite a bit more. So he probably wrote 3 of them at least, maybe 4. So that was like a good half and half effort. And then when it came time to start working on new material after that, we would just talk a lot about it in the van. And we were, as a band, like really intrigued by sci-fi, mostly movies. And we just loved it. Like we came to realize that like as a group, we really love sci-fi, Alien, 2001, The Thing. Like it doesn't matter. Like we love it. And so Mike had suggested at some point, like, what if we could try to do like a sci-fi concept record? And he actually had this idea for a story called Dead Planet. It's something that he had just like concocted in his brain, and he spilled the premise to us in the van, and very quickly, somebody was like, well, what about this? And somebody else was like, what about this? And like, it became a very collaborative brainstorming session, which was cool because, like I said, I mean, in the past it was a very individualistic approach to the lyrics, whereas the music was always more of a collective. I mean, Mike is the principal songwriter in that regard. He always brings the ideas to the table, and then we talk about them and flesh them out in the practice room. But it had never been like that with the lyrics until Dead Planet and Parting Remains. Yeah, because we all like and enjoy sci-fi, we're like, let's take what we already do and let's wrap it up in a sci-fi package. Because prior to that, like, we were just taking our nerdy love for all these movies and we were like putting them, like, that's how we were doing our merch. Like, most of our merch is just movie rips. And we were like, let's do our own thing. Like, let's make our own sci-fi thing. So yeah, like, since we came up with the idea, and like when the first draft of the story started getting passed around, it very quickly was very evident that I was like, okay, we have all these cool ideas, and this is coming from like an honest place, but none of us have any sort of experience actually writing. So that was another reason why we decided to push the story to the side and kind of wait to craft that a little bit better and maybe release it as its own like separate entity. The idea of thinking about what human life is going to look like once something catastrophic happens, which I think is inevitable, is just, I don't know, it's really intriguing. So yeah, we decided to try our hand at it, just sight unseen, no experience, like, throw it all out there. Right, it's punk, DIY, fucking give it your best shot. We're trying to push a lot of the same ideas to the forefront, and like I said, we just kind of wrapped it up in a new concept that would hopefully make it more palatable, more intriguing. Somebody said to me the other day, they said, hey, I've liked Hollow Earth the entire time you guys have been a band, but Dead Planet sounds like a band that finally found itself, that, took all of their influences and finally found the right way to connect them and to put them into one cohesive package. And I like that. Like, I might agree with that. Like, I think that, any band that starts and puts out their best record first, like, that's luck of the draw. But I think most bands, in most cases, like, they need to be a unit for a while and they need to evolve. And I think that's what we did. Like, and I think we took, like, bits and pieces of, each record previous, like, what worked about this record? Like, what are the things that we like most about it? Like, let's implore more of that into the next record. And 4 releases deep, second full length, I think we finally found it. I think we finally found a formula that works best for us. I think it also just simultaneously, like, the idea to start delving into sci-fi just, it coincided so nicely with the way that the sound of the band was evolving. So I think what you're getting when you listen to Dead Planet, like, is a very, like, cohesive something. It's a very cohesive something throughout. Like, it's, it's got an aesthetic, it's got a sound, it's got a vibe, like, and it's got a theme. Like, I think all of the elements are there. And, yeah, we're pretty proud of it. Yeah, I mean, the overarching theme is basically that, man does not own the earth. Like, we are a part of the earth just as much as jellyfish, frogs, birds, grass, and trees. But we don't see that. We don't acknowledge that. And so everything, essentially, with the exception of some more personal songs that we wrote on Silent Graves, but yeah, like, that's our overarching theme is to try to get people to understand that, we don't, contrary to what we may convince ourselves of, but, like, we don't own the earth. It's not ours to manipulate and to abuse, which is, I mean, civilized life. Like, that's all it's been is one big cycle of abuse and destruction. And so it's such a monumental problem. Like, there's no easy solutions. There's smaller answers. Like, we can be vegan, we can be more conscious of where our energy is coming from. If you have the ability to use solar or electric, like there's small things, and a lot of those things involve being in a position of privilege to be able to pick and choose like that. If you looked at the grand scale of things, I think that those solutions, they're just petty. Like, you know what I mean? Like some sort of major scale change would have to happen. At least raising a consciousness about it, at least trying to find a way to make people stop and think like, oh wow, like kind of like the way that I felt when I read Ishmael. Like if we could somehow make that sort of impact, even on any sort of small level with anyone who's reading, listening, or, tuning into anything that we're about, I think that would be super important. Like, just make anyone raise their level of consciousness about our relationship with the planet that we live on, and that it can't just be take forever. Like at some point that isn't going to work anymore. I mean, there's already so much evidence of it right now. And like the big thing in, the political climate is just this like blatant blinders. Like I refuse to acknowledge science. I refuse to see that climate change is a huge issue. Blatant disregard for fact. And like, it's insane. But, if in some way, shape, or form, Hollow Earth can affect, a handful of people and make them think twice about that mindset, this human supremacy, then, I don't know, maybe that'll be a good thing. As a fan of lyrics, like, this is something that Bane does a lot, or did a lot. Just little Easter eggs or little nuggets, whatever you want to call them, like sprinkled throughout, an E.E. Cummings quote, lyric borrowed from, this band or that band, literary reference here and there. Like it just makes it fun, I think, when I was thinking about that line, there's a part in our story where the main character, he sees this building in the distance. He's in this ruined landscape, and he sees this like tall skyscraper like sort of building that's still somehow standing amidst all this ruin, and he feels drawn to it. Like he can't explain it. He just feels like he needs to go there. So when I was thinking about how to convey that, like that line came to me, some strange magnetism drawing me to its core. And like, I love that, Drown, the song I lifted that from, is about depression. And I love that I can take that line and remove it from its original context and have it apply, but still somehow kind of, like, I think it makes sense. Like if you read it in context of the song, it fits, and it's about something very different, but also I think it does service to the way it was originally intended to be used. I didn't specify anything in the liner notes this time about the burn lyric, though. However, I meant to, and I completely forgot to. So I'm glad you asked, and hopefully somebody will see this and not accuse me of trying to pass off burn lyrics as my own. Okay, so the first tour we were supposed to do, Support of Dead Planet, had to be canceled. Unfortunately, our drummer's mother, she's been battling cancer for a really long time, and it went from bad to worse the day after Thanksgiving. And then that was a Friday, and then we were supposed to start tour on Saturday, which we did. We went and we played 2 shows in Canada. We played in Toronto and Quebec City with Ion Dissonance, who is also on Good Fight, and we did those shows. And then the way the tour was routed, we came back to Detroit on a Monday, and then we were to leave for St. Louis on a Tuesday. And we got back on that Monday, and Mike, our drummer, was just like, hey, dudes, like, I just don't feel right going on this tour, like, with my mom getting this terrible news. Like, it doesn't feel right, and I don't want to do it. So we couldn't make the guy go, and we pulled the plug. That was supposed to be a 3.5-week tour that was going to go down to Texas, out west, up the coast, and then back. And it was a band called Seeker, who was on Victory. Yeah, so we didn't do that. Instead, we booked a makeup tour for for the month of March. It's going to run from like March 2nd until April 12th. And we're going to run through the Midwest up into Western Canada, which is something we've been wanting to do for a long time. We've done some Eastern Canada stuff, but we have not made it out west, like Winnipeg, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, etc. Yeah, we're doing that, and we're doing like little regional stints. Like the first 5 days of Western Canada will be with Withdrawal from Winnipeg. They just put out a new record called Never on Escapist. And then we're doing the Pacific Northwest with Eris and Wake of Humanity. And then I think the rest of it we'll probably do solo. So like, California, and then through Arizona and Albuquerque and Texas, all that stuff. We'll just roll solo. Finish off in Detroit. There's a fest that happens every year called Berserker. This year, like Guar is one of the big headliners. Yeah, lots of cool bands on that, though. They haven't even announced the full lineup yet. We've only done one announcement, so we'll play that at the very end. And then from there, I don't know, like the rest of the year, like we want to be on the road as much as possible. There's a lot of things that get in the way of that, like booking agent stuff. And it was our hope to try to like be that band that like opens up, a 3 or 4 band package tour and maybe play to new rooms full of people that have never seen or heard of us. But that is, it's a very competitive thing. It's a very competitive thing. So we can't just waltz onto any old tour that we want to and, make it happen. So we're trying to play the game. We're trying to make the right moves, possible to end up on stuff like that. But, if we can't, which has kind of been a thing thus far, we'll just keep DIY touring the way that we always have. The writing process for this record, and pretty much anything we've written since We Are Not Humanity, is basically Mike Moynihan writes the songs from the ground up on his laptop. He'll record guitar and bass, and then he'll program drums, and he'll send them in an email to us, and we'll listen to them, and the guys will learn them as best as they can. And then they'll come into a practice room and see how it feels to play it live as a group. And from there, make changes. Like this works, this doesn't work, this could be better. Sometimes the song ends up very much the same as the way Mike sent it out. And then the other times it completely changes. It just depends. And then what's interesting about Dead Planet, which is unlike anything else we recorded, is we did that process. So we took the songs as we saw them, as best as we saw them, to Greg Thomas, who we recorded with, and he acted as more of a producer, which means that instead of just engineering the record, instead of just setting up the mics, getting good sounds and hitting record, he said, okay, I see what you guys are doing here, but you do this long build up, and then the part hits, and then you drop off again, and then you do this another long build up. Why are you doing that? You already gave me a build up. Let's get that out of there. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's a good idea. This impartial third party came in and just we laid the skeleton down of the songs, and he said, okay, this doesn't work. Think about what you guys have going here. You have this part that acts as a chorus. You have this part that acts as your verse. What is this part? We're like, I don't know. Just we thought it sounded cool, And so he played the role of producing the record, which was great, from every performance, with Mike Walsh on the drums, he'd be like, hey, I think you could do a fill there. And Mike would be like, but what kind of fill? I don't know. And he'd be like, I don't know. Get in there and do it. And the way he would go about it was always really fun, he never made it feel like work or feel like you're slaving over something. He had a way about him about getting the best performance out of each of us that he could get, right down to when I was doing the vocals, hey, you're saying love instead of. Why are you doing that? I know it's easy to do, but be conscious of that. Don't do that. So he like really ran a fine tooth comb over the whole thing, and he got the best performance out of each of us that he could get. And then he, on his own, he went through the record, like the way that the tracks bleed into one another, like everything that's happening between songs, like that's all him. And we wanted him to do that. Like we said, like, hey, like we went to him for a reason. Like he's a sci-fi nerd. Like his studio, the walls are covered from floor to ceiling in like movie posters, like every horror, slasher, sci-fi, thriller, mystery, suspense that you can think of. Like he's got like this crazy DVD shelf library. Like, we watched like 57 movies or something throughout the recording process. It was he was the right man to go to. So yeah, he took it upon himself to like add in all the layering and all of the weird noises and like connect all the tracks and sequence the thing and really make it feel complete. It was awesome. He did a great job. So we had a full month in the studio. It's a small studio. It's a basement studio. So yeah, we lived in this basement studio for a month, and it was small. There's no escaping each other unless you leave. And for me, I was writing lyrics, so I hadn't finished them by the time we got there. So there was like the first 2 weeks, maybe even more, that I was leaving every day. Like I would get in the car and I would go to a coffee shop or a bookstore, somewhere where I could write without, hearing Predator being played in the background and or video games. There was just nowhere in the space that we were allotted to go to get any sort of privacy. So I would leave, which I think was great. I would have went nuts there. Like we all at some point left to see significant others, except for our guitar player, Sean. He stayed there the entire time. And because we were there for a full month and we were also leaving for a tour, so we committed 2 months back to back of our lives for Hollow Earth. Like we were in the studio for 4 weeks and then we were on the road for 4 weeks right off the bat. No going home in between. So we were eating like we were poor. We were eating beans and rice and, just whatever we could get on the cheap. And like Sean was like literally eating beans out of a can some days, and like he never left. He was there all 4 weeks, every day. Like the only time he would leave is if we went somewhere as a group. We were just there. We were stuck in it together. We were making the record, whether we were feeling it or not that particular day. I don't know. We loved it though. But yeah, as trapped as you could feel, like it just, I don't know, it was still fun. And like you get so dumb when you spend a lot of time in an enclosed space. Like we watched the entire Saw franchise, straight up 1 through 7. We watched them all, and for better or worse, it was a good time. I will say guilty as charged. There is a song called World to Come off of Silent Graves that is a straight up cave-in ripoff. It's not note for note, but for all intents and purposes, it might as well be. If nothing else, maybe we can be a gateway for somebody else. Somebody likes that song and be like, well, you're not allowed to like that song unless you dig up Until Your Heart Stops, because that is where it came from. Aside from the tour that I mentioned earlier, it is completely up in the air. We're definitely going to write. There's no doubt about that. And in one way, shape, or form, I do believe it'll incorporate this overarching concept that we started with Parting Remains. We're going to keep trying to do what we always do, which is, tour the shit out of whatever current release it is we have. In this case, Dead Planet. We want people to hear it. We're going to keep pushing. I do hope that in some way, shape, or form, eventually will translate into something for us, whether that, gets us on a cool tour where we will have the opportunity to play for more people, or whether I don't know. I hope it opens up some sort of door for us, though, because we're not ready to stop. Yeah, we want to keep going, so we'll see. Oh, man, San Diego food spot. Kindred, man. If you're in San Diego and you're vegan, or if you love beer and craft cocktails, like that's where you got to go. Like Kindred fucking rules. Solid vegan menu, great environment, like atmosphere, aesthetic. You can just be eating a delicious meal, listening to The Sword, and it's pretty badass. Beyond that, I think the roster that Good Fight has assembled is definitely worth plugging. I mean, Axis and Exalt and Old Wounds, like the four of us had formed a relationship in one way, shape, or form. Like, we toured with Axis, and Old Wounds toured with Axis, and we've all toured with Exalt, sometimes together. We formed these friendships, and then a record label decided to get behind us, and push it even further. A Feather and Bone, Extinction AD. If you are watching this and you aren't familiar with any of those bands, like, check them out. Like, Good Fight has assembled a pretty cool little niche in the world of heavy music. Definitely worth plugging. You can purchase the music from Good Fight directly. If you're just living in the digital world, iTunes and Bandcamp, for sure, you can buy our music. If you're going to stream it, I do suggest Bandcamp because they have the lyrics right there. And there's a narrative excerpt that accompanies both Parting Remains and Dead Planet, which you can read those also on the Bandcamp. So Bandcamp might be my best recommendation if you're going to go digital. But the old classic tangible format is what I suggest most, which you can order directly from Good Fight, or I know that they have distribution deals, so you might be able to get it at local record stores, or like Rev HQ, I would imagine, would have it. Parting Remains was a vinyl only. It's a 10-inch, available in 2 different colors, and Dead Planet is on CD and LP. Yeah, go get it.